The grand ballroom of the Future Forward Gala wasn't just a room. It was a shimmering, breathing entity of wealth and influence. Every surface, from the towering, fluted columns of polished black marble to the vast expanse of the floor, gleamed under the soft, golden glow of colossal crystal chandeliers. Their facets caught the light, scattering a million tiny rainbows across the ceiling, like captured starlight. The air, usually thick with the cloying scent of lilies and old money, was instead crisp with a faint, clean aroma of cedar and something subtly metallic, a signature of the high-tech innovations being celebrated tonight. Sarah Jenkins, typically a quiet, almost invisible presence within the Thorne household, felt like a single misplaced emerald in a sea of diamonds and rubies. Her emerald green silk dress, a rare indulgence, felt both alien and empowering. It was a stark contrast to the sensible blouses and practical trousers she usually wore while chasing after Leo, Marcus Thorne's 6-year-old son. Tonight, however, the dress served as a kind of armor, a vibrant banner for the quiet rebellion brewing inside her. Each step across the vast, echoing ballroom felt deliberate, a conscious act of defiance. The hum of live television cameras, unseen but keenly felt, vibrated through the floorboards, a low, thrumming beat beneath the polite murmur of the crowd. Her gaze, usually focused on Leo, darted nervously around the room, taking in the faces, the smiles, the forced camaraderie. Everyone here, it seemed, was either a titan of industry, a celebrated artist, or a media personality, their public personas as polished and perfect as the marble beneath her feet. Then, a voice, saccharine sweet and impossibly cheerful, cut through her thoughts. And here we have the wonderful Sarah Jenkins. Sarah stiffened, a chill running down her spine despite the warmth of the room. It was Brenda Carlyle, the gala's host, a woman whose perpetually perky demeanor and blinding smile were legendary in the local news circuit. Brenda, a whirlwind of frosted blonde hair and sequined couture, glided toward Sarah, her microphone held aloft like a scepter. Her eyes, though framed by perfectly applied makeup, held a shrewd, calculating glint that belied her bubbly facade. Sarah knew Brenda. She was a master at extracting quotable sound bites, turning even the most mundane interactions into broadcast-ready moments. "The woman behind the scenes," Brenda chirped, turning her perfect smile directly to the camera, a red light glowing ominously, ensuring the smooth operation of the incredible Thorne household. "Sarah, tell us, what's it like working for the visionary Marcus Thorne? He's such a generous and private man, truly a titan of industry, isn't he?" The words hung in the air, dripping with a manufactured reverence that grated on Sarah's nerves. Visionary, generous, titan of industry. The accolades, whispered and broadcast, felt like a cruel joke, a bitter mockery of the grim reality Sarah knew. She offered what she hoped was a polite, strained smile, her facial muscles protesting the effort. Her gaze, almost instinctively, flicked towards the main stage, where Marcus Thorne himself, a towering, imposing figure in a custom-tailored suit, was accepting yet another award. The spotlight illuminated his sharp, intelligent features, emphasizing the self-satisfied smirk that played on his lips. He looked every inch the benevolent genius, the modern-day Midas. But Sarah saw past the polished exterior, past the designer suit and the curated smile. She saw the glint of cold calculation in his eyes, the subtle tension in his jaw that spoke of an iron will and an even colder heart. She thought of Leo, Marcus's 6-year-old son, currently tucked away in his elaborate, silent room in the sprawling Thorne mansion. Leo, with his wide, curious eyes that had slowly, imperceptibly, dimmed over the past year. The small, hidden bruises she discovered, dismissed by Marcus as childish clumsiness, had been the final straw. What she was about to do, she knew, was for him. It was a desperate gamble, a leap of faith into a terrifying abyss, but it was for Leo. "Mr. Thorne is certainly an employer," Sarah began, her voice a little shaky, a whisper of nerves betraying her composure. She could feel Brenda's unwavering smile, but now, a subtle shift. Brenda's eyes, Sarah noticed, were starting to narrow, just perceptibly, sensing a deviation from the perfectly scripted narrative she had envisioned. "He's very particular about his privacy and the well-being of his son Leo," Sarah continued, buying herself a fraction of a second, letting the innocuous words hang in the air. She paused, taking a slow, deep breath, tasting the metallic tang of fear and determination on her tongue. The air in the ballroom, moments ago thick with polite chatter, seemed to congeal, growing heavy with unspoken anticipation. She could feel the collective attention of the crowd, 1,000 eyes now turning towards her, drawn by the sudden, unexpected lull in the conversation. This was it. The point of no return. In fact, Sarah continued, her voice gaining a surprising strength, a quiet resolve hardening her tone, I've seen some things behind those closed doors that, well, they're not exactly what you'd expect from a visionary or a generous man. The murmur in the ballroom, which had been gradually subsiding, now fell into an almost absolute silence. It was as if someone had pressed a mute button on the entire event. A ripple of raw, unadulterated curiosity spread through the crowd, like an electric current. Brenda Carlisle's perfect, plastered smile finally faltered, cracking under the unexpected weight of Sarah's words. Her grip on the microphone tightened, her knuckles turning white. The red light of the camera continued to glow, steadily, relentlessly, capturing every nuanced flicker of surprise, every widening eye in the stunned audience. Sarah met the camera's unblinking gaze, a silent promise forming in her mind. The truth, no matter how uncomfortable, was finally coming to light. What would happen next was anyone's guess, but she wouldn't back down. Brenda Carlisle's professional facade shattered. A flicker of raw shock, stripped of her usual TV polish, crossed her face. Her wide, enthusiastic smile dissolved into a tight, disbelieving line. "Sarah, darling," she managed, her voice a strained whisper picked up by the sensitive microphone, "what exactly do you mean?" The question hung heavy, amplifying the unnatural silence that had fallen over the gala. Sarah felt a strange, surreal calm wash over her. The frantic butterflies settled, replaced by cold, steady resolve. This was it. No turning back now. She thought of Leo, tucked away in his elaborate, silent room, his small, vulnerable figure etched into her mind. She thought of his quiet, fearful demeanor, his haunted eyes, and the small, hidden bruises she'd discovered. The bruises Marcus Thorne had so casually dismissed. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about Leo. "I mean," Sarah continued, her voice gaining a surprising strength, each word deliberate and clear, "that while Mr. Thorne presents himself as a devoted father and philanthropist, what I've witnessed is a man who prioritizes control and image over the welfare of his own child." The words, stripped of any pretense, landed like sharp stones in the stunned silence. On the main stage, Marcus Thorne, mid-speech, stiffened. His head snapped sharply towards the commotion, his eyes, usually cool and composed, narrowing into dangerous slits. His PR manager, Elias Vance, a man as slick as his perfectly coiffed hair, had already begun to move. A look of panicked fury contorted Elias's features as he practically lunged towards Brenda and Sarah. His intention clear: shut this down, immediately. The gala attendees, moments ago a sea of polite murmurs, were now openly staring. Champagne flutes were forgotten as conversations died on their lips. A collective, almost audible, intake of breath rippled through the room. "This isn't part of the interview, Sarah," Elias hissed, his voice low and guttural, but laced with barely contained fury. He attempted to physically block the camera, his hand swiping frantically. But the quick-thinking cameraman deftly shifted, smoothly maneuvering to keep Sarah in frame, capturing every dramatic beat. The red light continued to glow, a silent, unwavering witness. Sarah, however, met Elias's gaze unflinchingly, her resolve hardening with his aggression. "You're making baseless accusations," he spat, his face beginning to flush a dangerous crimson. "Baseless?" Sarah retorted, a spark igniting in her eyes. "Is it baseless to report that Leo, a 6-year-old boy, is routinely locked in his room for hours for minor infractions?" Her voice, though not raised, carried an undeniable weight, cutting through the stunned silence. "Or that his father dismisses his emotional needs, often leaving him with caregivers who are under strict orders not to coddle him?" A collective gasp, more pronounced this time, rippled through the audience. Faces previously impassive now contorted with a mixture of shock and dawning horror. The sheer audacity of the accusation, delivered so calmly, so directly, on live television, sent a tremor through the carefully constructed veneer of the event. Marcus Thorne, now off stage, began striding purposefully toward Sarah, a human tsunami of rage. His security detail, a phalanx of silent, suited men, moved to intercept, their faces grim. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, now burned with a dangerous intensity, flickering with a fury that transformed his public image from benevolent billionaire into something far more menacing. He was no longer the composed philanthropist. He was a predator, cornered and exposed. "This is a malicious fabrication," he roared, his voice booming across the stunned room, amplified by the sudden silence. His words, meant to intimidate, instead conveyed a sense of desperation, a man losing control. But it was too late. The seed of doubt had been planted, fertilized by Sarah's calm conviction and amplified by his own sudden, public outburst. The camera held steady on Sarah, capturing her unwavering gaze as she braced herself for whatever came next, knowing the battle had only just begun. The tension in the room was palpable, a live wire buzzing with unspoken questions and mounting anticipation. The silence in the grand ballroom was no longer just a momentary lull, it was a profound, suffocating void. It stretched, taut and agonizing, broken only by the frantic, muffled whispers of Brenda Carlisle's producers barking orders into her earpiece. Brenda herself, usually a picture of poised professionalism, was now a fascinating tableau of conflicting emotions. Her eyes, usually so calculating and focused on ratings, held a flicker of genuine concern, a hint of the journalist beneath the show host. She was caught in an impossible bind. The live broadcast was a train hurtling off the tracks, but the story was undeniably compelling, potentially career-defining. "Sarah," Brenda pressed, her voice urgent, cutting through the static of her earpiece and the stunned quiet of the room. "Can you provide any proof of these claims?" The word proof hung in the air, a lifeline thrown into the tumultuous sea of accusations. Elias Vance, meanwhile, Marcus Thorne's PR manager, had abandoned all pretense of subtlety. He was no longer whispering, he was barking orders into his phone, his face a horrifying shade of crimson, veins throbbing at his temples. He looked like a man watching his entire world, built on carefully curated illusions, crumble before his eyes. His frantic gestures, the sweat beading on his forehead, only served to understate the gravity of Sarah's words. Sarah hesitated for a moment, the weight of the cameras, the silent judgment of the crowd, the fury emanating from Marcus Thorne himself, all pressing down on her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in her chest. She knew the risk she was taking. This wasn't just about losing her job, this was about potentially facing legal retaliation, about becoming a pariah, about exposing herself to the wrath of one of the most powerful men in the country. But then, the image of Leo, small and vulnerable, his eyes shadowed with fear, flashed through her mind. The decision crystallized. This wasn't just a risk, it was a necessary act. "I have video recordings," she stated, her voice clear and firm, cutting through the last vestiges of silence like a surgeon's scalpel. Each word was enunciated with a quiet, unwavering conviction that resonated through the opulent ballroom. "From hidden cameras I installed after I grew concerned for Leo's well-being." A fresh ripple of gasps went through the crowd. Hidden cameras. The implication hung heavy. This wasn't mere hearsay, this was tangible, undeniable evidence. "Recordings," Sarah continued, her voice gaining a steely edge, "of Leo crying alone for hours, of Marcus Thorne berating him for trivial matters, of Leo's caregivers, more like silent overseers, ignoring his pleas for comfort." Another collective gasp, louder this time, permeated the room. The elegant attendees, dressed in their finest, now looked genuinely horrified. This wasn't just gossip or a scandalous affair, this was an accusation of child abuse, delivered on live television against a revered public figure. The narrative of the visionary, generous Marcus Thorne was collapsing in real time. On the main stage, Marcus Thorne, who had been listening with a mixture of disbelief and growing fury, finally broke. He was no longer slowly approaching. He was striding purposefully toward Sarah, his security detail moving with a panicked urgency to intercept him. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, now burned with a dangerous, unhinged intensity. His meticulously crafted composure had evaporated, replaced by a raw, primal rage. He was no longer the benevolent billionaire, but a predator cornered, his fangs bared. "This is a malicious fabrication," he roared, his voice booming across the stunned room, amplified by the perfect acoustics of the ballroom. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, his jaw tight. A desperate attempt to extort money. "She's a liar." The accusation, meant to discredit Sarah, instead sounded shrill and desperate, an unconvincing defense against the quiet certainty in Sarah's voice. But it was too late. The seed of doubt had been planted, not just in the minds of the gala attendees, but in the millions of viewers watching at home. It was fertilized by Sarah's calm conviction, by Brenda's evident shock, and most damningly, by Marcus Thorne's own uncharacteristic outburst. The narrative had shifted irrevocably. As Marcus's security detail closed in, forming a human wall between him and the live camera, Sarah, with a defiant glint in her eyes, held up a small, discreet object. It was a simple, unassuming USB drive, barely larger than her thumb. It caught the light, glinting innocently, yet holding the power to shatter an empire. "And I have it all right here," she declared, her voice resonating with an unshakable resolve. The cameraman, recognizing the pivotal moment, zoomed in, capturing the tiny device held aloft, a beacon of truth in the heart of the gilded cage. The image of the USB drive, small and potent, filled the screens both in the ballroom and across the nation. Then, with a sudden, jarring abruptness, the screen faded to black. The live feed was cut, undoubtedly by frantic network executives or Thorne's own PR team. But it was too late. The words had been spoken. The evidence had been shown. A stunned nation was left in a state of suspended animation, reeling from the bombshell revelation, left to wonder what unspeakable horrors were contained on that tiny device, and what would happen next in the inevitable fallout of Marcus Thorne's unraveling empire. The gala, meant to celebrate philanthropy, had become the stage for its dramatic, public undoing. The next morning dawned not with the usual gentle hum of Silicon Valley, but with the cacophony of a media maelstrom. The Future Forward Gala, once a beacon of philanthropic achievement, was now a mere footnote, overshadowed by the seismic shockwaves of Sarah Jenkins's live television exposé. News channels, both national and international, replayed Sarah's interview relentlessly, dissecting every word, every nuance of her unwavering composure. Analysts, pundits, and legal experts debated, speculated, and condemned, their voices a continuous urgent hum from every screen and radio. The small unassuming USB drive Sarah had brandished became the most talked about, most sought-after item in the country, its potential contents igniting a firestorm of public outrage and insatiable curiosity. Sarah, now a reluctant media sensation, found herself in a surreal new reality. One moment, she was standing exposed on live television. The next, she was being whisked away with a quiet urgency by Detective Isabella Rossi. Detective Rossi wasn't what Sarah had expected. No flashy suit, no dramatic entrance. Instead, she was a woman of formidable presence in a no-nonsense charcoal pantsuit, her short, practical hair framing a face etched with the quiet resolve of someone who had seen too much. As they sped away from the immediate chaos of the gala, the detective's voice, gravelly but surprisingly kind, broke the stunned silence in the car. "Ms. Jenkins," Detective Rossi said, her gaze steady and direct as they sat in a nondescript, surprisingly sterile office, far from the gilded cages of the Thorne mansion. "What you did was incredibly brave. And incredibly reckless." Sarah nodded, exhaustion etched deep into the lines around her eyes. The adrenaline from the night before was finally receding, leaving her feeling hollowed out, but strangely clear-headed. "I know," she murmured, her voice raspy. "But I couldn't stand by and watch Leo suffer anymore. I couldn't." She began to recount the subtle cues, the insidious shift in Leo's behavior that had first sparked her concern. The way his laughter had become less frequent, replaced by a quiet timidity. The increasing isolation, Marcus Thorne's growing obsession with discipline that bordered on cruelty. The fear in Leo's eyes that had gnawed at Sarah's conscience, day after day, week after week. It was this creeping dread, this persistent, unsettling feeling that something was profoundly wrong, that had driven her to install the hidden cameras, a desperate measure born of love and fear. She described the chilling moments she'd reviewed the footage. Leo, alone in his opulent nursery, crying himself to sleep, his tiny voice barely audible. Marcus Thorne's harsh reprimands for trivial matters, delivered with a coldness that chilled Sarah to the bone. And the caregivers, silent and unmoving, under strict orders not to coddle the child, their faces blank, their humanity seemingly stripped away by Thorne's domineering presence. Then, Sarah revealed a critical piece of information, a lifeline in her desperate quest for truth. "And there's Eleanor," she began, her voice dropping slightly. "Eleanor Vance." Detective Rossi's eyebrows subtly arched, a silent acknowledgement of the name's significance. Eleanor Vance, Marcus Thorne's executive assistant, and, more crucially, Elias Vance's wife. She's been helping me," Sarah explained, her voice almost a whisper. "Not directly, not openly, but she's been a quiet, anonymous source of information for months. Little things. Cryptic notes about Marcus's schedule, warnings about Leo's routines changing, about new discipline policies. She left me a key card for the camera installation. Eleanor, it turned out, had her own complex, strained relationship with her husband, Elias, a relationship deeply entangled with Marcus Thorne's manipulative orbit. Sarah believed Eleanor was genuinely concerned for Leo, a silent co-conspirator driven by a conscience that couldn't fully ignore the darkness she witnessed, though fear had kept her from acting more openly until now. It painted a picture of a household riddled with silent suffering and unspoken desperation. Meanwhile, cloistered in his lavish penthouse, far above the city's burgeoning outrage, Marcus Thorne was in a frantic white-knuckled damage control meeting with a sweating, pale Elias Vance. The air in Thorne's study was thick with the scent of expensive cigar smoke and raw panic. "This is a smear campaign, Elias," Marcus bellowed, his voice hoarse with fury as he paced his impossibly large office, a caged tiger driven to distraction. "A complete fabrication. You handle this. Discredit her. Destroy her." Elias, looking utterly defeated, tried to calm him, his words barely coherent. "We're working on it, Marcus. Our legal team is filing injunctions, planting stories, discrediting her, anything. But the live broadcast. The video, it went viral. It's everywhere." Marcus stopped pacing, turning to fix Elias with a gaze colder than ice. "Then make it disappear, Elias. Or you will disappear. Understand?" The unspoken threat hung heavy between them, a chilling reminder of Thorne's ruthlessness. But both men, in the cold, clear light of morning, knew the gravity of the situation. The public was outraged, their carefully crafted image crumbling into dust. The spotlight, harsh and unforgiving, was shining directly on Marcus Thorne's meticulously constructed facade, and it was beginning to buckle under the intense heat. The game had changed. The sterile, almost clinical calm of Detective Rossi's office was a stark contrast to the storm now swiftly reaching Marcus Thorne's gilded gates. With Sarah's unwavering testimony and the chilling contents of the USB drive, meticulously copied and analyzed, Detective Rossi finally had the leverage she needed. The pieces, once scattered, were beginning to fit into a damning mosaic. An hour after Sarah finished her statement, a team of uniformed officers, led by Rossi herself, converged on the Thorne mansion. The grand facade, usually a symbol of impregnable wealth, now seemed like a cruel mockery, its imposing beauty unable to conceal the turmoil festering within. Inside, the opulence felt suffocating. Every room, adorned with priceless art and bespoke furniture, resonated with a silence that spoke volumes. They found Marcus Thorne's private study, a sanctum of control and technological prowess. Ironically, this room contained the very tools that would lead to his undoing. State-of-the-art surveillance equipment lined one wall, much of it pointed directly at Leo's nursery and playroom. The videos confirmed Sarah's every accusation: a cold, distant father, a terrified child, his small frame trembling, his pleas for comfort ignored, and the caregivers, silent, unmoving figures who turned a blind eye to Leo's distress. The footage was harrowing, irrefutable proof of emotional neglect and psychological abuse. Back at the station, Sarah, though still reeling from the emotional intensity of the past 24 hours, found a surprising solace in the quiet courage of Eleanor Vance. Eleanor, Marcus Thorne's executive assistant and Elias Vance's wife, arrived at the precinct looking fragile but resolute. The news of Sarah's live expose had, it seemed, finally given her the impetus she needed to break free. Her eyes, though red-rimmed from what Sarah suspected were days of silent torment, held a steely glint. She produced a thick, neatly organized binder filled with internal documents, meticulously kept email exchanges, and cryptic notes that had once seemed innocuous but now clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Eleanor's motivation, she explained in a quiet, steady voice to Detective Rossi and Sarah, was twofold. First, to free herself from the psychological grip of Marcus Thorne. 4 years, Thorne had held a devastating secret over her husband, Elias. A past financial impropriety, a minor but legally compromising indiscretion from early in Elias's career. Marcus had been leveraging this, subtly at first, then with increasing brazenness, to control both Elias and, by extension, Eleanor herself. He had created a gilded cage not just for Leo, but for everyone around him. Eleanor had been living under the constant threat of Marcus exposing Elias, a threat that kept them both loyal, silent, and complicit. But the second, and perhaps stronger motivation for Eleanor was Leo. She secretly adored the quiet, bright boy, often slipping him extra treats or a comforting word when Marcus wasn't looking. She had watched with growing despair as Leo withered under his father's cold, controlling hand. I couldn't stand it anymore, Eleanor confessed, her voice cracking with emotion. Watching him, knowing what Marcus was doing. Elias, he was too afraid. But after what you did, Sarah, on TV, I knew it was my only chance. For all of us. Eleanor's documents weren't just about Leo's mistreatment. They painted a damning broader picture of Marcus Thorne's manipulative tactics, not just with his son, but also with his employees and business partners. There were memos detailing the precise instructions for Leo's discipline, disguised as child-rearing philosophies. There were email chains hinting at financial irregularities within the Thorne Charitable Foundation, suggesting it was less about philanthropy and more about tax evasion and personal enrichment. And there were veiled threats to business rivals, implying industrial espionage and sabotage. The subplot of Thorne's financial and corporate malfeasance began to intertwine seamlessly with the child abuse allegations, painting a portrait of a man who saw the world, and everyone in it, as tools for his own gain. Meanwhile, Elias Vance, alone in his luxurious, yet suddenly claustrophobic, office, was crumbling. He watched the news, saw snippets of Sarah's interview, and then, the devastating blow. His wife, Eleanor, her face grim but resolute, on the screen, walking into the police station. The betrayal, from his perspective, was absolute. He had sacrificed his integrity for years, swallowed his conscience, all to protect Thorne's image and, by extension, his own family's fragile security. And now, it seemed, it was all for nothing. The once unshakable empire of Marcus Thorne, built on a foundation of secrets and lies, was showing deep, irreparable cracks, exposed by the quiet bravery of a nanny and the hidden conscience of an executive assistant finally reaching her breaking point. The walls were closing in, and Elias knew, with a sickening certainty, that he too would soon be crushed beneath them. The walls were closing in on Marcus Thorne with terrifying speed. His company's stock prices plummeted, and board members scrambled to distance themselves. Lawsuits piled up, filed by emboldened former employees. The air in his penthouse, once a testament to his control, now felt heavy with accusation. Desperate, Thorne turned on Elias Vance. "You handle this, Elias," Marcus snarled, pacing his opulent office. "Get Sarah Jenkins to recant, or I'll make sure you lose everything." The veiled threat against Eleanor hung heavy in the air. Elias, pushed past his breaking point, finally broke. He contacted Detective Rossi, offering a full confession, laying bare Marcus Thorne's financial fraud and illegal surveillance practices in exchange for a lighter sentence. He detailed how Thorne had used the family foundation as a tax haven and had illegally surveilled business rivals. The subplot of financial impropriety roared into full view, intertwining with the child abuse allegations. Elias, seeing his wife's brave stand, finally chose to do the right thing. Meanwhile, Marcus Thorne, oblivious to Elias's betrayal, made a desperate move. He arranged a private meeting with Sarah through his lawyers, offering a massive sum of money and a lifetime of silence if she would retract her statements. The offer was tempting, the promise of escape appealing. But as Sarah looked at the lavish offer, she pictured Leo's frightened face, and a fresh wave of resolute conviction washed over her. She knew this was a desperate play, Thorne's final test. "No," she stated, her voice quiet but firm. "I will not retract my statements. I will not be silenced." She pushed the offer back across the table. The game was on. The trial of Marcus Thorne wasn't just a legal proceeding, it was a global spectacle. Every major news outlet descended upon the courthouse, eager to witness the dramatic downfall of a man who had once seemed untouchable. The courtroom, usually a hushed chamber, buzzed with electric energy, packed to capacity with journalists, legal scholars, and a public hungry for justice. Sarah Jenkins, composed and articulate, was the undeniable star witness. She stepped onto the stand, her simple but dignified attire a stark contrast to the opulence she had once navigated. Her voice, clear and unwavering, filled the courtroom as she recounted, in agonizing detail, the slow, insidious decline of Leo's spirit under his father's cold, controlling hand. She described the chilling moments captured on her hidden cameras, Leo's quiet sobs in his locked room, the vacant stares of the caregivers following Thorne's "no coddling" directive, Marcus's icy dismissals of his son's emotional pleas. The video evidence, played on large screens for the jury and the public, was devastating. The images, devoid of sound for much of the child's suffering, were punctuated by Sarah's hushed, heartbroken narration, painting a picture of profound emotional neglect and psychological abuse. But Sarah's testimony was only the beginning. Eleanor Vance, Thorne's former executive assistant, followed, her face grim but resolute. She brought with her a trove of internal documents and meticulously kept email exchanges. Her testimony meticulously detailed Marcus Thorne's manipulative tactics, not just concerning Leo, but extending to his employees and business dealings. Eleanor spoke of how Thorne had twisted his charitable foundation into a personal piggy bank, siphoning off millions for illicit gains and using the pretense of philanthropy as a tax shield. She exposed how he had used illegal surveillance and industrial espionage to sabotage business rivals, consolidating his power through ruthless, unethical means. Her testimony was a devastating blow, turning the spotlight from merely child endangerment to a sprawling web of corporate fraud and illicit activity. Then came the agonizing testimony of Elias Vance. Looking a shadow of his former self, his once slick hair now disheveled, his eyes haunted, he corroborated every single detail. His voice, hollow and devoid of its former arrogance, laid bare Marcus Thorne's intricate web of deceit, from the deliberate isolation of Leo to the systemic financial crimes. He confessed his own complicity, his fear of Thorne's leverage over his past financial impropriety, but spoke with a newfound, fragile sincerity about his desire to finally do what was right. His betrayal of Thorne was complete and utterly damning. The defense, led by a high-profile, ruthless legal shark, launched a ferocious counterattack. They tried every trick in the book to discredit Sarah, portraying her as a disgruntled employee seeking fame and fortune, fabricating stories for revenge. They painted Eleanor as a jilted wife, seeking to destroy her husband's former boss out of spite, and Elias as a desperate man cutting a deal to save his own skin, therefore inherently untrustworthy. They attacked Sarah's character, her past decisions, anything to muddy the waters and introduce reasonable doubt. But Sarah held strong, her unwavering gaze meeting the jury's, her quiet conviction a bulwark against their aggressive tactics. The most dramatic and heartbreaking moment came when Leo, now in the care of a loving foster family and receiving intensive therapy, was brought in to testify. Though his testimony was brief and carefully managed by child psychologists, designed to minimize his trauma, his presence alone was a powerful statement. His small, fragile voice, though carefully guided by questions, filled the silent courtroom as he recounted small, heartbreaking details. The quiet fear when his father entered the room, the long hours spent alone with only his toys for comfort, the longing for a simple hug that never came. His testimony, delivered with an innocent truthfulness, broke the stoic facade of even the most hardened journalists and members of the public in the courtroom. It turned Marcus Thorne from an abstract villain into a tangible threat to a vulnerable child. The climax of the trial arrived during Marcus Thorne's cross-examination. His defense team, desperate, put him on the stand. He entered, still exuding an air of entitlement, a practiced sneer playing on his lips. But as the prosecution systematically dismantled his carefully constructed alibis and presented irrefutable evidence, his composure began to crack. Cornered, his meticulously crafted persona crumbled under the intense pressure. He lashed out, his voice escalating from indignant denials to outright threats. He ranted, he railed, he accused everyone in the room, Sarah, Eleanor, Elias, even the judge, of being part of a conspiracy to destroy him. His words, venomous and self-serving, confirmed every accusation leveled against him. He revealed the true monster beneath the polished exterior, a man consumed by narcissism and a chilling lack of empathy. The jury, visibly recoiling from his outburst, exchanged uneasy glances. The truth, stark and undeniable, was laid bare for all to see. Marcus Thorne had, in his own fury, sealed his fate. The verdict came swiftly, an almost audible gasp of collective relief rippling through the packed courtroom. Guilty on all counts. The words, delivered by the jury foreman with solemn gravity, echoed, sealing Marcus Thorne's fate. Once a titan, he now stood exposed, his empire in ruins, his name forever synonymous with scandal and the chilling abuse of his own child. Flashbulbs erupted as Thorne was led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of disbelief and impotent rage, a final ungracious exit from the stage he had so meticulously controlled. The media frenzy, which had consumed the nation for weeks, slowly subsided. But the impact of Sarah Jenkins's brave actions resonated deeply. She became a reluctant symbol of quiet courage, a testament to one ordinary person speaking truth to overwhelming power. Her story had ultimately laid bare the uncomfortable reality that even the most glittering facades can conceal the darkest of secrets. Leo, the silent, traumatized heart of this storm, was now safe. After the trial, he was placed with a loving foster family, far from the cold, isolated opulence of the Thorne mansion. He began a long, arduous, but hopeful journey of healing through intensive therapy sessions. Sarah, true to her quiet devotion, remained a consistent, supportive presence in his life, visiting him regularly. Watching Leo, tentatively at first, then with increasing freedom, rediscover laughter and the simple joys of childhood, was Sarah's greatest reward. Eleanor Vance, after navigating a difficult period of public scrutiny, began to rebuild her life. The divorce from Elias was swift, a painful but necessary severing of ties to a life of compromise. With the burden of Thorne's blackmail lifted, Eleanor channeled her intimate knowledge of the billionaire's machinations into something positive. She found her calling working with a non-profit organization dedicated to protecting children from abusive situations, using her expertise and newfound voice to advocate for vulnerable youth. Elias Vance, having cooperated fully with the prosecution, received a significantly reduced sentence for his past financial impropriety. He faced a difficult road of public condemnation and personal introspection. He began the long, painful process of atonement, a journey that would undoubtedly take years. His betrayal of Thorne had been self-serving in part, but also a desperate effort to reclaim a fragment of his own lost integrity. Sarah, true to her nature, declined the lucrative book deals and endless media appearances. The spotlight had never been her goal. Instead, she chose a quieter path, rooted in genuine service. She continued to work as a nanny, but now with a renewed sense of purpose. Her experiences had given her a unique understanding of hidden vulnerabilities within seemingly perfect families. She became a silent advocate for children's rights, speaking at small community gatherings and working closely with organizations that provide resources for whistleblowers in child protection cases. She used her platform not for personal gain, but to amplify the voices of the voiceless. The world had learned a harsh, unforgettable lesson about appearances, about the insidious secrets that can hide behind the most opulent facades, about the human cost of unchecked power. Marcus Thorne's fall served as a chilling cautionary tale, a stark reminder that no one, regardless of wealth or status, is truly above the law. Sarah Jenkins, the quiet nanny, had not just exposed a billionaire's secret, she had ignited a crucial conversation, a spark of hope that even the most powerful can be held accountable when ordinary people, armed with courage and conviction, find the strength to speak up. The muddy water of deception had been stirred, and for the first time, clarity began to emerge, promising a cleaner, more transparent future. What would you have done in Sarah's place? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. This story of Sarah Jenkins shows just how important courage and integrity really are, especially when facing overwhelming odds.